This episode may polarize a few people. It may be a bit controversial. That's okay, right? This is just my ethos. This is just what goes on in my head and kind of how I operate in my business. So I'm going to share it with you and hopefully it resonates with my core audience. So the title of this episode will be something along the lines of Swift Sword, and I'm going to get into what I mean exactly by that. So I have a swift sword in my business. And basically what that means in essence is that I act on things very fast. It doesn't take long for me to make a decision or an action. It's a very swift cut, right? And so I'm very serious about this when it comes to staff. Anything to do with people, I have a swift sword. Okay, so I've kind of got the motto of hire slow, fire fast. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll unpack that. Obviously, I've talked about it before, but the reason you want to hire slow is because you want to raise the barrier to entry, because it's going to get rid of a lot of tire kickers, a lot of time wasters, and it's going to increase the investment on the employee's behalf, so they feel like they're more invested in the business and the job itself. So they'll do better work, and they're usually more incentivized to be a better employee. And then firing fast, if someone is falling off the wagon, if they're straying from the path that you want them to be on, obviously issue them, a warning, have a warning system like we do. But at a certain point, you just have to move them on. And like I like to say, I like to free them up for other opportunities, which is a very, very nice way to say you're fired. But yeah, the other day I told someone that on average, I fire between 1 and 3 people every week. And that was a bit of a lie. I fire between 1 and 3 people every fortnight. But what I meant by that was every fortnight I go down to Bunbury, which is where my main business is, and I check in on things there and do my thing. And pretty much the only thing I do when I'm in Bunbury is I have a couple of people that I need to fire. So I got mixed up in my words and I said every week, because like every week that I go to Bunbury, I fire between 1 and 3 people. So it's more like every fortnight, which means every month I'm firing a handful of people. But at the same time, we have such a good hiring process that we're able to not only replace those people immediately, but we also add between 1 and 4 more. So we're constantly growing and we're never going backwards, even though I'm firing all these people. And other people are like, when I said that, there's obviously a few surprised people that are like, well, how do you grow if you're firing so many people every week? And I'm like, it's part of the reason we're able to grow. It's because I have a litmus test and a swift sword. I don't have a high tolerance for BS in the business, right? Like, I just don't. Every time there's drama, I nip it in the bud straight away. I'll issue warnings. If work quality drops off, it's usually a sign that the person is no longer happy in their job and they're not interested. So I'm just going to, give them a warning, and then eventually I'm just going to move them on and free them up for other opportunities. And that's my whole thing. And it's gotten me to the point where I am now, which is, I've done pretty well. And it's not going to, everyone's not going to agree with this, right? This is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. A lot of people are going to want to run their business differently. Some people may want to focus on retention for their staff. I like to focus on just constantly getting the cream of the crop and cutting off or trimming off the fat. So it's like, if you have a team of 30 staff, not all 30 of those people are going to be on the same level of efficiency, of work ethic and quality, right? It just doesn't work like that. Like, think of a classroom at school. You're not going to have 30 kids that are all on the same level, all learning at the same pace, all doing the same great work. There's going to be a few people in that group of 30 that just aren't cut out anymore. They never were, or they just stopped caring at a certain point and they don't even really want to be in the job anymore, but they're not saying anything because it's convenient or whatever. So there's always going to be a couple of people that we can replace with someone better. And that's what I do. If I didn't have such a great hiring system, I couldn't do that. But because I do, I can, right? And it's like, it used to be uncomfortable for me to be someone that could just fire people. Like, I used to be a very reserved, very introverted person, and conversations around firing were very, very difficult for me. And that's kind of what a lot of people have been saying as well, is that firing someone is a difficult conversation. And that's true, it is, especially if you're introverted like I was. And one thing a lot of people like to say is that I just can't be that person, right? Like if you're an introvert and you go to a party with a friend and you see other people talking to strangers and your friend's like, oh, we should go talk to them. And you're like, oh, I can't be that person. I'm too much of an introvert. I can't be an extrovert. Sorry, my email is going off. I'm going to mute that. And it's like, you can be, you just don't want to be. And yes, it is uncomfortable to assume a new identity, but it's not impossible. And so instead of saying, I can't, I like to flip it and tell people to ask, how can I? And so in the example of, introvert to extrovert, it's like, no, you can be an extrovert. It's just, you need to learn the behaviors associated with being an extrovert. And so you can begin to operationalize this new kind of, I guess, identity or persona, and then you can step into it. And for some reason, a lot of people have a problem with that as well. They're like, oh, just be yourself, just be yourself. And if I was the same person now as I was 4 or 5 years ago, I would be nowhere in business or in life. We need to constantly evolve as people to do better in not only our businesses, but our personal lives. If we look back 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 years, we have evolved as a society. We have evolved as people. The vernacular we use, the language we use, the norms and the values that we have, everything has changed, right? If we stayed the same, nothing would have happened. At least nothing good would have happened. Plenty of bad still happens, but I think, in the grand scheme of things, we're doing pretty well, right? And so it's the same for you. If you just stay the same way, you will never grow as a person and thus as a business. And it's like, you now know at this point in time, you know who you need to be in order to run your business to the best of its ability, or at least you should. If you don't, you should probably work on that first. But it's like, you should have a pretty good idea of what you need to be in order to get to where you need to be. But a lot of people like to say, I can't be that person. And so let's begin to operationalize how we can be that person. So, back when I was very timid and kind of shy and reserved in the business and I was scared to fire people, I said that too. I was like, I can't be that boss that's like mean and will just fire people on a whim. But then I slowly became that person over time. Like, you'll naturally just become that once you've employed over 100 people like I have. Like, dealing with people for that long, it'll turn you a little bit cold, but like, you can begin to operationalize it. And for example, it's like, if you're scared to fire people because of the response or whatever it may be, or you just don't think you have it in you, start to break down all the behaviors associated with that, I guess, that identity. So it's like the identity of a strong, assertive leader / boss. What personality traits and what behaviors do they associate with? It'll be, if they walk into a room, their head is high, they make direct eye contact, they will smile at people, and they will talk with assertiveness, and there'll be inflections in their voice, and they'll say this way and this that way. It's like, okay, if you just simply do that, then you're one step closer to being that new person. And like the introvert extrovert example I gave is probably the most clear-cut example. Introverts, they walk into a room, they're shy, they won't make eye contact, they won't go up and shake someone's hand and ask how their day was. If you simply just flip that and do the opposite, you begin to become an extrovert. It's not like you're born an introvert and you stay that way, or vice versa. You can assume the behaviors that are associated with that identity. It's the same with being a boss. So if you're scared about, if you want to be that sort of boss, or if you want to be that sort of leader, or if you want to be any type of way in your business, if you want to be better at sales, but you don't think you're extroverted enough, or you don't think you're good enough at talking to people, just look at what other people do who are the kind of people that you want to be, and break down their behaviors and operationalize it. So yeah, nothing gets done if you stay the same way you are now. I don't like that we're called human beings. I think we're human becomings. We're always becoming something new. So do away with that. You always want to be evolving. in a constant state of evolution. So that was one little tangent. But anyway, back to my Swift sword. So I have what I call a litmus test, and I have a litmus test for almost everything. So if someone asks me if I want to go out, if I want to go to an event, or if I want to go out for dinner, I have like a mini litmus test that I will run through. And basically the root of that litmus test is to figure out whether or not it'll be worth it for me. So will this be worth the time, the money, and the energy investment? And if I can't answer a couple simple questions, yes, in the affirmative, then I will not do it. Same thing in business. If I want to, because I buy cleaning businesses too, or at least I'm looking at buying cleaning businesses. I've only bought one and it wasn't very big, but I have a litmus test for buying a cleaning business. It needs to fit a certain lot of criteria. It has to have recurring revenue. It has to not have a whole catalog of different services. It has to have 4, 5 or less. It needs to have a manager in place. The revenue needs to be within a certain range. And if I can't tick all these boxes, I don't go ahead with the deal. So that is a litmus test. I also have a litmus test for people. And you guessed it, if someone doesn't fit my litmus test, then guess what happens? I have to get rid of them. Swift sword, right? And, it's the same in anything. I have a swift sword when it comes to buying businesses. If I was on a Zoom call a couple months ago with the owners of a business I was looking at buying, and they said something that just caught my ear, and it was something that completely goes against my paradigm and what I was looking for in a business. And as soon as I heard that, I basically just ended the call there. I was like, this probably won't be a good fit for me. Thanks for your time, but I'll be on my way now. So I have a swift sword in every aspect of my life. It isn't just exclusive to getting rid of people from my business, but that is another avenue where I'll exercise that. So like I said, a lot of people are going to find this polarizing and maybe a bit controversial. Some people will argue that you can work on building people up and retaining staff better rather than having a system where it's like a constant revolving door. But like I said, this is just what works for me. This is what has got me to this point in my business. And I think it's what's going to propel me to the next stage as well. So you need to find not only what works for you, but also have a good idea of what could work for you and execute on that. So for me, I never used to be this way, but I realized at a certain point that I kind of had to step into these shoes. And so I became that over time. And I can't stress this enough. Instead of saying I can't be that person, I can't fire people, I can't have difficult conversations, ask yourself, how can I? Okay, and look at the person, because the person that you want to be is right beside yourself. Turn and look at that person and ask yourself, what behaviors are associated with this person that I want to be, or this new identity? And let's start to do those things, right? And don't be scared to change yourself. Don't be scared to change your identity a little bit and change your behaviors in order to be the person that you want to be. And I said this in, I think, one of the previous episodes, is like, choose your hard. I like to say this as well. Choose your hard. Yes, it's hard to change your behaviors and change your identity and persona in order to get to where you want to be. But it's also hard to be walked all over in your business. It's also hard to not feel like a leader and not feel like you have real control over your business. So they're both hard, but I know what I choose every day of the week. So I went down to Bunbury again the other day. I was actually down there for an awards night, won a couple of awards. I was runner-up for Business Person of the Year, which is really cool. But anyway, I was in Bunbury, and same thing, like I went in there, I had a whole bunch of information that I'd aggregated, and I identified 2 people that I needed to fire. They both had warnings in the past, so it was time for them to go. And I did that. And same thing as always happens, they get really defensive and they come up with excuses and they never take accountability. And one of them was really, really rude, which is fine. I'm used to that now. But one thing that you have to verbalize and help them understand is, like, you don't want to be firing people. Firing someone and then hiring someone new to replace them costs you money, it costs you time, and it costs you energy. So the last thing you want to do is fire someone. That is a last resort. And so people need to understand, like, if you're firing someone, from your perspective, it's because you have no other option. It's because you have all the information that you need in order to make this decision. And it's come to that point after a certain series of events and stuff. And that's why a warning system is good, because it gives them a timeline and it shows them that you do have issues with some of the things that they're doing, and it's not in alignment with where you want the business to go or the values of the business or whatever. And so, but a lot of the time they act surprised as if they had no idea this was coming, despite warnings and all this stuff. And so I always found that interesting. So yeah, I fired those two people and replaced them, and inevitably the business will get better and better, because, you know, the people that we fire, they tend to be the people that call in sick all the time. They're the only people that get complaints. And we've actually done a graph for this. I don't have access to it right now. I don't know where it is. It's in our OneDrive somewhere. But basically, we looked at all the people who call in sick, all the call-ins that we had over a period of about 3 months. We had a look at all the complaints over a period of 6 months, because we record all this stuff. And 60 to 80% of the call-ins and complaints came from like 10% of our team, right? So when you put it into that perspective, when you look at it through that lens, it's like, if you just remove those couple of people from the team and replace them with better people, all of a sudden, 70, 80% of your problems vanish. And that's what I'm always trying to do. I'm always trying to make the quality of the team better. And the only way I can do that is by trimming off the fat and replacing them with better people. After a while, look, it's a cleaning job. No one's going to stay in this job forever. At a certain point, some people just get tired of it. They just get bored of it, and their work rate begins to drop off. Stuff goes on in their personal lives, and for whatever reason, they just fall off the wagon. And again, it's like, well, you need to be more understanding. You need to, like, people have things going on in their personal lives. You need to be more understanding. I am, like, to a degree. But at a certain point, like, I don't want to be someone's mother. You know what I mean? Like, even Stacey said this to me. She's like, sometimes not even sometimes, she said, I feel like their mother, like, all the time. I just feel like I'm responsible for their personal lives. And it's like, we don't want to be that. Like, we're compassionate to an extent, but at a certain point, it just becomes ridiculous. People need to go, and they can be someone else's problem, to be frank. They'll go get a job somewhere else, and that's great, good on them, but they can be someone else's problem. I would much rather replace them with better people who are going to do better work and help take us to where we want to be a little bit quicker. And in a business that relies on a good reputation and good people, you need to have this swift sword. So if you're one of those people in business now who, like, you're kind of struggling to have these conversations, it might not even be about hiring. It could be sales. Maybe you're scared to ask a follow-up. Maybe you're scared to give your price on the spot. Maybe you're scared to sell people, just point blank. You're scared to sell people, and you say you can't be that person. You can't be better at sales. You can't bring yourself to do these things. Instead, I just want you to ask, how can I? Simple as that. How can I do X? How can I do whatever? And then break down the behaviors associated with whatever persona or identity that you want to kind of bring onto yourself, and then start to work backwards and do these things bit by bit. And over time, you'll get better at them, because, like I said, reps make you better at anything. And then once you've done it enough, you'll get comfortable with it, first of all. But second of all, you'll get better at it. And third of all, the flywheel will keep turning, because it's a harmonious cycle that is going to compound over time. And so I always like to give like 3 takeaways in an episode. I kind of do that inadvertently. I don't know. I always end up giving 3 things. I don't even plan to do that beforehand, but I guess those are my 3 things. Have a litmus test and a swift sword. So your litmus test should be a list of criteria that needs to be met about a certain thing. It could be employees. It could be a client. Like, if a client has big dogs, or if they follow you around, or if they have if they live in an apartment complex and it might be tricky to service them, you need to have criteria like this. And if they don't meet that criteria and they fail the litmus test, you have a swift sword and you cut them off. Same thing with staff, have a litmus test. Same thing in your personal life. It's great to have litmus tests. So That's one little piece of advice. Second of all, instead of saying I can't, instead ask, how can I? And then third, break down the behaviors associated with the person that you want to become in your personal life or in your business, and begin to move further towards that light, and you'll thank yourself for it long term. So those are 3 little takeaways. Again, this may upset a few people. I don't know. I have a very brazen approach when it comes to business. A lot of people don't really realize that, because I guess I come across like a kind of warm and fuzzy in a lot of my videos and stuff. But like the people who know me, they say I'm like a robot. A lot of my staff either call me a robot or a psychopath. There's no in between. So make of that what you will. I'm completely fine being called that. I think it's funny. But yeah, that's me. I fire a few people every time I go down to check on my business. That's kind of my role. That's the only thing I really do. The reason I do that is because I want to take the load off of Stacey. Stacey can continue being like friendly with everyone, and then I'm the big bad wolf that comes in and creates havoc and puts people in their place. So that's just what works for me. And I thought I'd share that with you, and maybe there would be something that resonates in there. So that's my whole ideology of the Swift Sword. That's kind of my ethos. And I hope that has helped you in some way. So thanks for listening to another episode of Self-Made. Be on the lookout soon, because I'm going to do interviews. I've got a few lined up. I'm hopefully going to do one with all the gang from the forensic course that we did, all my besties, my pals, like Arlene from Mrs. Muscle. I'll do a podcast with Scott and Gabby from Kings, and also Megan from Valley to Beach Forensics. So I'm hopefully going to line those up over the next few weeks, and you'll get to enjoy some long form content with some familiar faces and voices that you know and love. So look forward to that, and I'll talk to you again soon.